Hey, what's up? Silas here. So this is not going to be a short video. It's going to be a bit more of a conversational video. I'm going to be reading some things, going over different topics and concepts and tying them together. I'm going to be showing you guys some things, asking you guys to actually watch the screen and the things going on. There's going to be things going on the screen. And this is going to be me talking about reading certain things. So I did say this video is not going to be short, and it isn't. So that whole on the screen thing, I'll do that in separate videos, but still enjoy this video. Still a lot of topics, still a lot of concepts. Some of the topics are going to be the American Civil War that's supposed to come, that some people are fearing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court in the United States of America that just happened. Justice Kennedy, one of the Supreme Court's justices, who was apparently one of the swing votes in the whole court. There's 9 judges, so normally there's 4 that are admittedly on the left, and then there's 4 that are admittedly on the right, and then the fallout that's coming from that. And we're going to be talking about Maxine Waters, who all my cards on the table. I think she's a detestable person. She's one of the few politicians that I look at and I really just find to be a horrible person. As Antonio Sabato Jr. said, I think this is a great term, a hustler of hate. It's not necessarily a race hustler because they don't care about race. They don't care about these things like that. She's a power-hungry individual that does not care about the harm that's caused, and she actually understands perfectly well that hate is an excellent tool. This is one thing I've been saying about politicians for a long time, and I personally know some people in politics. I know people trying to run for office. I know people that have held office. I have friends and relatives and family that are in political positions in different places. Like, people can go on there and check and look and like, who is this person? This person's saying these things. Now we're gonna no. I mean, I just know people who are in politics or in the public sector who are in different places, and I know them as people who are truly trying to help. Now, the process that they go about this help might not be positive, but one thing I've said about certain politicians is I look at them and it's a lot easier to get somebody to vote against somebody else than it is to convince them to vote for you. It's a lot easier to make somebody hate someone else if you're going against them. Let's say you're in a competition, it's you and this other person. It's a lot easier for me to say, you're going to hate this person that you're going to like me. And Maxine Waters is somebody who counts on that, lives on that. It's her life's blood, and she's a hateful person for it, and I strongly dislike her for it, and I'll make my case for exactly why, and also just ask people out there who still likes her. Of course, we're going to talk about Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States of America, and touch on a few things with that. But the first thing is going to be just about this American Civil War that's coming. So, with the retirement of Justice Kennedy, as I mentioned, some people have been freaking out. Some people have been on the political left, and I'll get back to this later on at the end of this video, with some reading of celebrities who are just losing their minds apparently on this. But there was this one specific one that, to me, struck out a lot more than the other ones that I've seen. And here it goes. This is something that somebody posted on Twitter, then it was put on Occupy Democrats, which is, Occupy Democrats is a site that actually, it's sprung up from the Occupy movement, that Occupy Wall Street movement, then that was more a political left movement, and then they came up. And I've had this thing, I have had this long ongoing conversation, it was like over a couple of days on 2 of the videos that I had. That one video where I read the transition from socialism to capitalism, the challenges of the transition of socialism to capitalism in the contemporary world. And I also had a video about reading something from Ludwig von Mises. No, sorry, it was something from Rothbard. And we had this conversation. Somebody came on there and was saying that he is a scientific socialist and a classic Leninist, like he's a purist on it. And we're talking about the different things, and he's saying the modern movement isn't necessarily socialism. And that's one thing I do kind of agree with him, where, okay, I don't agree with him that it's not socialism, but the target of communism, he says, is ostensibly the reduction of state influence. But the process to get to there is to go through socialism. So we had a lot of disagreements on what issues are going on in the country right now. Are they due to socialism or are they due to capitalism? He was making the case that it was due to capitalism. I was like, no. These are things. These are some of the main planks of communism. So we're just disagreeing with the definitions of what exactly are you talking about. And as I've mentioned before, I think most of the problems in the world result from people, from the way we define X rather than what X actually is. Like most of the problems in the world are not, let's say, I get a glass of water and I'm like, I am thirsty. I really need this glass of water. And I just see this clear liquid and I pick it up and I chug it and it turns out to be vinegar. Now, the problem isn't the vinegar. The vinegar is the vinegar. It is what it is. But the problem lies in me falsely identifying that glass as water. So the glass itself is not a problem. The vinegar itself is not the issue. If I understood, if I was able to accurately identify what was in that glass, then I could actually be like, okay, let me get water. Or if somebody else was accurately able to identify that, hey, I'm going to drink that glass, they would be able to be like, hey, no, that's vinegar, here's water. So that's kind of what I'm getting at with that. But let's get to what this person wrote. Kennedy resigning means that Roe versus Wade will be overturned and that the Supreme Court will become a rubber stamp for Trump's fascism. This isn't 1933. This is Kristallnacht. Sorry. We have two choices, revolution or death. So this was posted also by Occupy Democrats Logic, which is a site that kind of trolls and makes fun of the people who are on the political left posting this. Now, I wanted to retweet what this person had said. I wanted to actually respond because some of these things, it's like, is this real? Can this person really be trolling? Maybe they're not really being... Because I troll sometimes. I'll post some things and just completely troll. Like I had that one video I was talking about Black Panther and things like that. I've tried this couple of videos where I go into a character and I pretend like, hey, what is going on? Why are we doing this? We should not be doing this. Black people, African people are taken over by these white people. And then people actually buy into it and they think like, oh yeah, you're being serious. Or I'll go on and post on people. Sometimes I just like doing pose. Instead of like sarcasm, I think pose is the new sarcasm. And a pose is when you actually pick something and you actually put it in their language. And you're so close that people are like, is this person serious? Are they being for real? And no, so I kind of like doing that. So I was thinking this could be a Poe. And I end up going to check and double check and see, is this actually something somebody posted? And I went on to Twitter, found the profile, and sure enough, it's an actual post by the person. And the person happens to be a transsexual individual. I think it was male to female in this person's situation. So one thing I originally wrote, once I read this, I was just thinking, look, I take what these people say as seriously as I translate it. I look through a lens of the same way when they say things like poverty. When this person talks about how, we're in poverty, Americans are in poverty, so many Americans are in poverty, we deserve a living wage, when they say things like that, that's kind of how I translate this. When they talk about assault, when they just talk about anything being assault. I just saw this current thing right now. There was an occasion happening with this football player, Jameis Winston, he's a quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He apparently got drunk and he was in an Uber, which is his ride-sharing service, and he got in the front seat and he apparently touched the female driver's genital area in an appropriate way and then stopped. And then there's NFL, the National Football League itself, has this apparent rule that says, like, if you're in a sexual assault situation where the person cannot consent, or you physically assault them in a certain way, you limit their physical movement, they can't leave the area, then there's a baseline punishment of 6 months. Now, people are talking about this, reviewing this, because he got not 6 months, six games off. He got a 3-game suspension, and people are talking about it. Some people are talking about like, oh, you have to explain. Why didn't he get 6 days? Oh, he should be in jail. He should be fired. He should be this and this. The NFL, because touching somebody in that manner is wrong. Yes, but it's not the same thing as an actual rape, because they're talking about a Ray Rice situation. With a Ray Rice situation, this was a player who was caught on video in an elevator with his wife at the time, or fiance, who hits him, then he punches her, and she falls and hits her head on the side of the elevator and gets knocked out, and he drags her out of the elevator. That was one of the recent ones that really sparked this great outrage in what's happening in the NFL. Now, I don't know how many people are going to be taking a knee over this issue and talking about how, people are treating Jameis Winston in an unjust way, they're over-exaggerating. They're probably not going to have things like that. They're probably just going to pile onto him or just be quiet about this situation, because equating that kind of violence that occurred in the Ray Rice situation, equating the situations when there's been outright rapes, to something like what Jameis Winston did is not quite the same. He was drunk. He said he's actually taken alcohol out of his life. But that was a long digression that I might even cut out. But coming back to this, what I'm talking about is I don't take what these people say seriously. I have to take these things with a grain of salt because they can't truly mean some of these things that they say. I mean, when they're talking about these things, it's not the realistic thing. Like, I translate revolution in this time as the same way that they speak of poverty and assault. It's not what I or a lot of people I talk to who are a lot more into semantics and actual definitions of things think that it means. And I think a lot of the people on the political right, a lot of the people who are conservative, a lot of the people watching my channel, watching this video, you'll probably understand that when they talk about certain things, it is not what you mean. Like one of my earlier videos was that I have to keep reminding myself about this, is that they literally mean figuratively. When they're like, oh my God, this was literally the worst day of my life. That's the kind of same language or context that they're talking about this revolution or life or death situation with. Oh my God, I almost died. I went to the office and Susan said, and I was like, oh my God, that's what they're talking about. I almost died. Because to them, that's the language that they speak about these things. They're not talking about an actual life or death situation. That's not what they're talking about here. So when they're talking about revolution is coming and things like this, revolution or death, this person is having enough struggles with their own gender identity. They are trying to understand something that's so core about their own personality. And I've struggled with that too. I can somehow relate to that from having traveled around, being a kid of many different cultures, and trying to understand where I fit in and how I understand things, how I adjust to the world, how I translate what's going on in this place. Oh, this is poverty here in Kenya. I can see this person is in poverty because they're living in a corrugated metal shack and making maybe $2 or $3 a day, working an entire day, hard for an entire day, and only getting $2 or $3, and still being able to go home and support a family somehow and manage something because of their location they live in. That's what I'm looking at as poverty in a certain sense. Then I go to the United States of America and I see people in a multi-bedroom home getting welfare, not trying to get jobs, not trying to do these things, or somebody who's come from a certain background, maybe a middle-class background, they've gone to school, studied a certain thing, decided to go into a certain job, and they're getting their $10 an hour at this job, maybe working 30 hours a week, and they're talking about, I need more, I demand more in my life. They're talking about that person's in poverty. That person also getting all these social welfare and things like this welfare state goods is also somebody in poverty. So trying to square those two definitions of poverty together in my mind and try to understand, that's what I'm trying to understand about society in general, now let alone trying to understand who I am. Am I American because I've lived there? Should I try to be French because I was born there? Am I Kenyan because that's where my parents are from? Who am I, let alone where do I fit into the entire world? So this person, this individual who posted this thing about Crystal Knott, they can't understand what history is. They can't actually know what happened in Nazi Germany for them to think that that situation is happening here. These people can't be the same people who are going out in the street calling Donald Trump a fascist, calling Donald Trump a Nazi, and also truly understand that the Nazi Party stood for the National German Socialist Workers Party, I think, National Germans Workers Socialist, but socialist was in there. I should get that right. Let me look that up. Because they don't understand that. They don't understand what actual socialism is. They can't actually understand what this is. You can't actually think Crystal Knott, that what initiated this, which was a part of this whole process, is actually occurring, and just sit back and be like, I'm just tweeting about this. And then we come out, oh my God, I can't believe people were like mad at me for saying this, when those are some of the responses on the Twitter, because this got picked up, people actually responded, because you can't really understand those terms and think what's going on with Trump actually is. You can't understand what fascism really is and think Trump is a fascist. So you can't actually have the same kind of knowledge of that and then post something about revolution or death. So it's not revolution or death that's going to happen. It's not something for you to actually freak out about. And now I think we're going to move on to the next section about the actual civil war. Because people are posting this, and the first kind of reaction, I think maybe a year and a half ago or a little over that, I would just been like, ha ha ha, what? These are the people who are going to fight? But really, are these the people who are going to fight? Now, I also ask people on the right who are taking this too seriously. I'm like, why are you guys taking these people literally? Why do you think this person is literally going to go in a revolution? Because people are like, oh, bring it on. I'm like, yeah, no, they're not really going to do that. It's not really that big of an issue right now. And part of what I'm saying is, if there was a war, what would this war look like? What do people think this is actually going to turn out into? And on that point, I have this, I'm just going to kind of skim through this response I had with somebody, because somebody went on and we were kind of mocking this. Me and a few other people were just mocking this on the comment section that one of my friends posted this in. And then someone is like, hey, gents, you might want to read up on modern civil wars. If Isht hits the fan, it's going to be very bloody with ethnic and religious cleansing and all other beauties of modern society. And I asked, okay, first of all, I kind of made fun of them with like, educate yourself. That whole thing, like, oh, you need to learn if you know about this. I'm like, no, part of the main reason I know it's not going to be an issue, it's not an issue for me to actually freak out about, is because I actually know things about civil wars. There's this one really excellent series that's going on in Mises Network, Mises TV on a YouTube channel. There's a guy who's come on and he's doing this breakdown where he does these 30-minute breakdowns of the civil wars in the United States of America and how they developed. And I'm like, I've studied the history. I've read the rise and fall of the Third Reich. I know what's happening in the United States of America is not going to lead to some kind of situation like that. Not only are the times entirely different, but what exactly would this civil war look like? And this is what I asked the person. I said, snark aside, I mock because I've read history. Now, can you give me an example of a modern civil war that you imagine occurring in the United States of America? What are the sides? The people, who versus whom? Where would it be fought? Not just the battlefields, but the safe areas where people would recuperate and stock up on supplies, etc. Then what would the salient points be that people would choose sides to risk life and limb for, especially when so many people are actually triggered into daily life-disrupting issues by pronouns. Like there's groups of people who, if you just call them a different pronoun, they won't be able to just function, like really just crippled by it. So how are these people going to get something strong enough to be able to have the mettle that it takes to actually engage in an actual war, to actually go out there and decide, I'm going to get this weapon and try to kill this other human being as they try to kill me? When you had battle-hardened people in the First World Wars and the Second World Wars who went out there, and the amount of people that actually end up shooting, part of the reason they initiated boot camps and things like that to train people is because they had to understand we have to break people down. You can't just get a regular human being to go out there and shoot somebody. Even if somebody's shooting at them, it takes such a level of threat to them and a level of, I don't know what the right term is, the constitution these people have to turn off that ability that we have, that general respect of life that we have, to dehumanize that other being to the level where you can actually just think, I'm going to shoot to kill that person. It's not a simple thing. Like when people talk about how violent the world is, first of all, the world is getting a lot safer, and currently reading this excellent audiobook, which I think everybody should read or listen to, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined by Steve Pinker. And it's just confirming some things that I'd talked about before and viewed before and other people, but the world is a lot safer. Just think about the access people have to things that can hurt people and how few people actually do it. That's an amazing thing to realize about humanity. But I was just telling this person, just give me the proof. What do you think it's going to look like? The same way I'm asking him, I'm asking you guys out there. If you actually think there's going to be a civil war of sorts, what do you think that civil war is actually going to look like? What is going to happen? These same questions I asked, who versus who are the sides? You need at least two sides. You need a reason, you need locations. So I said, now, shall they use Facebook to communicate and plan stories? Or what will their objectives be if they can't even elucidate basic, supposed history-altering issues going on today? That's the one thing that I'm talking about. The same way I'm talking about how, I've talked about this before in the kneeling thing in the NFL with Colin Kaepernick and those kind of people. A lot of these celebrities and professional athletes who are saying it's an issue, we need to address this. And then you say, okay, can you talk about some salient points? Can you talk about some proof? What exactly is the issue? And when it comes down to it, they can't show you that issue. One second. So yeah, back, and that's what I was talking about. I was talking about the communication. How exactly are they going to communicate? Right now, I just got a call from the United States. In New York, I had some friends over there, had some stuff there. They were helping me out. They just FaceTimed with me and they just talked to them and we went through. They're like, "Oh, do you need this? Do you need that?" I'm like, "Oh, how about this?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm going to go here with this," and you just plan that way. So yes, I do understand things can be planned in an amazing way right now. The amount of communication going on right now is crazy. But how are you going to plan and actually get the logistics of holding an actual civil war in the United States of America? So the person answered, it was like, okay, it's hard to predict, but most likely it will be closer to the American Civil War. Chances are there'll be an alignment of states. Most large metropolitan areas will be Democratic strongholds. Depending on the posting of the army and the power structure, there'll be a chance of like stages and sieges and blockades and other areas. Like they talked about the war in Ukraine and in Syria and Zello. Talked about Zello, Twitter, these kind of things being used for social media platforms being used for communication by both sides. And they're talking about the religious tension in Syria and saying, oh, the tension in the United States of America won't be religious, but across racial lines and ethnic lines and things like that. And due to the huge territory again, they said that it would probably be vast, relatively calm areas like the Northwest and the Midwest, most likely. So that is not a lot like what happened in the American Civil War. And I've actually looked into the American Civil War a lot, looked at a lot of wars a lot, just tried to study why do humans do this, why do this. And I think that was more because of the conflicts I had in myself and tried to understand the world and also trying to create this universe that I've talked about in some previous videos of Carbon, which I'll get into more in the upcoming months, where I was trying to understand what would the conflicts be in this universe that I'm creating? Why the reason people fight? What's the political system that would be running here? So in the process of trying to research and understand that, it led me into a process of self-discovery and discovery of the human condition in general to understand how things work. But when it comes to these things he's talking about, the points he's pointing out are the reasons where I'm like, that's exactly why it won't work. And this was my response to him was, okay, first of all, I gave a link to that series that I talked about with the Civil War thing, but I went into this. Okay, I was like, look, the sheer size and demographic makeup of the United States of America makes any comparison to countries such as Ukraine and Syria comical. Like, you may be able to make a case comparing by state, and this is what I say also a lot about other places when they say, oh, this system works in Sweden, so we should try to have it work in the United States of America. So that's like assuming that system actually works. Sweden has a population of 8 million people in the size of an area like maybe Rhode Island's like the smallest state, so maybe like Maine. So it's not necessarily a big place. And you're trying to say you're going to take something like that into the United States of America that's a lot bigger, that's 350 million people, and the square footage in the area is insanely larger. The demographics of the people inside pre this, because these Swedish programs they're talking about came from immigrant influx, so the demographics of the country are a whole lot different in that kind of situation. So you can't really talk about these things in that way. Then when it comes to like Twitter and Facebook, when it comes to Syria and Libya and things like that, Twitter and Facebook were maintained by the United States of America with infrastructure, with satellites and things like that from outside the country. So if Twitter and Facebook were in Libya or in Syria at the time, those systems would crash down, or they would come under control of one of the parties. One of the sides would run into Facebook and be like, look, we're controlling this. So any rebel communication going across Facebook won't be encrypted anymore. They'll just get all the data. So how would you do that in the United States of America? Is Facebook going to take sides? Are they going to be able to run it? Like, what's the logistics of all that? So I think people also overestimate how many minorities there actually are in the United States of America. And this is one thing I've also talked about in that one video about there is no white genocide, or talking about how to stop white genocide. It's just like, if you're a white person, self-identified white person in the United States of America, and you really have a consideration about the white race going away, find a white woman, reproduce with her, find white friends, encourage them to reproduce with other white people, And that whole demographic thing will be corrected in a matter of a generation. There is still a majority, largest group, in however you want to define it, counting, even if you just want to count Northern European, Eastern European, because not Eastern European, because Eastern European would also consider Spain and the Spanish people, Spain and Portugal, the Spanish and Portuguese who came to the Americas also went to Southern America, and you have those families. So some of these Latino people are actually white because they're as white as a German family that's been in the United States of America for a few generations because they just moved to south of the border. And those are not necessarily the people who are coming across the border. The ethnicity or the genetic makeup of the people coming across the border are normally people who are more mestizo, where they're mixed with like the Spanish and the conquistadors and the actual indigenous population that they met there, the Aztecs, Incans, Mayas, those kind of people. They're normally mixed up, or just the pure ones of them actually are the ones coming up across the border. So yeah, there's that kind of thing, demographic makeup, but still, the white people who are, say, 75% plus European in the last couple of generations, who can maybe track their ancestors, majority of their ancestors back to Eastern Europe, Western Europe, even counting Eastern Europe, they're still, I think, like 60% of the United States of America. So if they just had 2 kids replacement rate, they would actually still, that whole demographic change thing won't actually happen. So the idea that, first of all, that these actual racial groups are going to join up together. Like I just heard that Compton, which is where like Snoop Dogg and these people are coming from, like that's another thing with Snoop Dogg talking about the issues that are happening with Donald J. Trump, that video where he's shooting Trump in the head. Meanwhile, in actual Compton, where he's from, Latin American, Southern American migrants have come in, and their gangs have come in, their MS-13 and these kind of people have come in and taken over that entire area. So now the demographics of those areas are changing entirely. These people don't get along with the Bloods and the Crips. The most violent people in each ethnicity, we're talking about the Triads, or I think the Chinese group and the Yakuza. I don't know if the Yakuza still exists. It's such a small percentage of the people, but they don't get along. They're not all of a sudden going to have some United Colors of Benetton like group where they're like, let's unite and let's us violent people unite and fight against the white people. First of all, who are the violent white people? They're maybe the Aryan Nation or like Hell's Angels or people like that, or the KKK is like 50,000 people tops registered in the country. You're not going to convince people to jump on that. I know there's these talks about, the alt-right and things like that. They're talking about the Charlottesville incident, which good news has come out. That guy has actually been arraigned for attempted vehicular manslaughter. So let's see if that actually turns out to be something that's actually backed by the evidence and see the process of that. But that's not a lot of people. That is not that many people. How many people do you know who are in a gang personally? If you're listening to this video, chances are you might have met somebody that's been in a gang. I've known a couple of people that are in a gang. I actually know somebody that actually went down to that Charlottesville incident situation. But when you talk about the entire country, who is actually the percent of people in the United States of America that are willing to join a group based on their race and commit violence against other groups based on their race right now would be maybe 1 million people tops. Like, that's a long stretch. I think I'd say 1 million people counting all the people in jail. So now if you got all those people together and they actually divided up in their races, however you want to define races, now you talk about the people who are mixed or the people who have their entire tribes within them. Because look, the Bloods and the Crips already dislike each other enough. So you're saying the Bloods and the Crips and all these other just predominantly black gangs are going to bury the hatchet, join together as a black group, bury the hatchet with all the MS-13 and all these other different gangs, Norteños and something with the S, which are in the jail one. I watched this thing in the prison. There's this YouTube channel about prison, Fresh Out or something, and he talks about the different kind of gangs like that. So there's different gangs of Southern people who are more Southern Latin American and people who are more Northern, like Central American. But anyway, they have that thing. So those two groups are going to actually bury the hatchet along with the countless other gangs, come together. Then they're all going to bury the hatchet, come together with the black gangs. And then now those black gangs and that mix of the black and Latin American gangs are going to join the few Asian gangs in there. and they're going to go and no, how is this going to happen? What kind of universe do you think is going to happen? I think this is quite, the revolution can only be televised. This is only video game level stuff. This is not reality based things. I'm not buying it. Just I'm not buying the 500 genders or 83 genders or whatnot. I'm not buying this story of this civil war coming in. So another thing he was talking about how these areas, and this is one thing I've been talking about with the United States of America, how's it going to work? Where are the people? Let's say the lines of the who are going to be the people, the Republicans versus the Democrats, the red states versus the blue states. If you're going to say that, because it's not states, when you break down the county map, these people are all put into one area. These, like the Democrats, as a person clearly pointed out, will be the metropolitan areas, the major cities. That's where people would be. Like New York City. Okay, first of all, New York City. I've lived in New York City. The people in New York City are, first of all, they're not armed. So if a civil war broke out, they would have to first of all get the guns in there. Now, once they got the guns in there, most of the people in there are not used to using guns. They're not capable to actually use these guns and use them. Even if you could convince them to use them, they wouldn't be able to do it. It had to be a small militia of people who are somehow on the political left coming out to actually hold those guns against the people in the red states in those vast areas between these small blue islands who are already armed, already familiar with hunting, already familiar with using guns. How would this civil war actually exist if it was on those lines? It wouldn't. It'd be over in like a matter of days. Now, you don't even have to have the actual people getting killed. I've lived in major cities, as I've mentioned before, and back when I was in high school, I remember finding out about the city that I lived in. I was in around the Maryland area, around the DC area, and somebody was like, "Yeah, you know, if they just shut down the trucks delivering food on a daily basis to the grocery stores and different stores in the area and the supermarkets, the whole area would run out of food in a day. So in a week, the stores that people had at their house would be out." People aren't preppers. There's a lot of preppers in the outskirts, in the rural areas, but there's not people preppers with a lot of space of storing, getting like a bunker and having like canned food and all these things. There's not enough space in that. People are living in like one bedroom apartments, studio apartments. They're not stocking up on food. So if you actually had a situation where it's blockaded out, again, the revolution can only be televised. It can only be a video game. It can only be a film. Like there was that one Batman where they had like the whole like Gotham City was like blocked off and there was like one bridge where things were coming in and out and you saw how it just like descended into chaos within the city because there's no supplies. How are people going to live? You could blockade the place rather easily and the food would end so fast. It's not going to happen. It's not a realistic thing. So another thing is talking about countries like Syria, talking about countries like Libya. Part of the reason, okay, Libya is a bit different because that was rather quick and now it has descended into a mess because a lot of people are coming from outside, from other countries and going in, and then it's a lot easier to have the whole like, oh, we're Arab. And this is one thing I've talked about with Libya. It's not necessarily that much of the Middle East. There's already bad actors, ISIS, what's it called? With these Al-Shabaab, those kind of people have already come in there who already set militias, set warlords, set violent people have come into that area, and the power vacuum that left after Gaddafi was taken out is what has caused this. There was also support by forces, by NATO forces to bomb different areas. There's also the whole restrictions from abroad, from people saying, hey, Gaddafi, if you go in and do this with these helicopters to these people, we're going to come in and do this, so you can't do this. So there was a certain crippling. If you do X, or if you don't do XYZ, we're going to do ABC. So that kind of shapes how that thing goes, and that's why the Syrian war has existed for so long. Because Russia is on one side, the US has been supporting certain people. If you had a civil war in the United States of America, first of all, you're trying to say like China, and all these other countries in Europe are just going to sit back. Canada is going to be like, yeah, okay, we're going to do nothing. Mexico would probably take some chances of things. They start coming in on the border and start taking some land back or something. But how is this going to happen? Who's going to be funding this? What kind of exterior influence is going to be in there? First of all, to have a Syrian kind of civil war going on for 7 years, I know Donald J. Trump is now kind of pulling out. There was some kind of movements where I think the U.S. government said like, okay, look, you Syrian rebels, we're not going to defend this anyway. we had this kind of armistice or this kind of deal to say like, okay, these areas are not going to be taken over. This area, I think on the border with Jordan or something, we're going to have that area kind of be like a safe zone for refugees or for the rebels. And then the Russians are like, oh no, actually there's ISIS people there, so we're going to bomb them anyway. So they do that kind of thing. And then the US has kind of been like, yeah, okay, we're not going to actually defend you guys. Like, you guys can defend yourselves. We're not going to be against you guys attacking them, but we're not going to jump in for this. So without that, without this exterior influence from Russia, from the United States of America, from other people outside, the Syrian civil war would have ended a long time ago. But there's other countries also in the Middle East who have influence there. Iran has interests there. Saudi Arabia, all these other countries have interests in what goes on in Syria. So they're actually involved in there. What would the international involvement be in this ostensible United States civil war? That's one thing I'm thinking. Like, where would like the foreign air power coming in? Would Britain come in and say, and I do understand that these countries are overmatched extremely when it comes to military, but let's say somehow you grounded, or the American military itself, the military actual machine itself, the Leviathan itself, was actually split half and half in some kind of even kind of way. Half the Air Force bases, half the tanks. Yeah, do you think tanks are going to be rolling around the streets like Humvees, things like that, minefields and things like this? So let's say that was either half or completely disabled. Do you think the French government would get into some kind of deal with some Republican militia and come in and fire bombs like what's it, Chicago maybe, because Chicago's a Democrat city or something, and even the Democrat city, like how the entire area isn't Democrat. Still a lot of Republicans and people on the right in these places. I lived in New York. I know there's a lot of people on the actual right there. The entire New York City area itself, maybe 20 million people, the whole the whole metropolis area, counting the suburbs and things like that, and the exurbs. Some of it's in Jersey across the bridge there. But even if you just count Manhattan itself, of about 8 million people, I think 8 million or maybe 5 million, I'd say probably 1 million of them are politically on the right. They just, the way people vote, you're just not going to really have a say. Now, this is talking about even just adults, because now you're talking about 1 million. That's like kids and things like that. They're not going to be fighting. But anyway, so what's going to happen? Is France going to pick sides? Is Canada going to pick sides? Is Mexico going to pick sides? What's going to happen in this kind of situation? What's going to actually maintain a civil war to last for a long time? Next, we're going to go to, I was talking about this. It's hard enough thinking about global warfare breaking out again, which is why proxy wars are being fought. Like, I can't imagine an actual full-on Second World Wars type thing where Russia is against mobilizing the entire army and going across borders and trying to sweep across Europe, and then have the United States of America or the Western European forces come in and have mass an entire army and go in and have that full spectrum war where the entire countries are tied towards actually creating ammunition and creating weapons and things like that. That is so hard to imagine, let alone a localized kind of thing like that in the United States of America. Truly, I can believe there might be a thing where some nutter comes in, and this is why I'm talking about why I really, truly hate people like, who are hate mongers like Maxine Waters going out and talking about these things. I can't imagine there being one person who maybe gets like some kind of biological weapon, gets some strain of some virus somehow, and they have some kind of psychotic break, although the people who have access to these things are normally higher IQ people, and higher IQ people are not really, again, this is why the revolution can only be televised, can only be a video game, because only in video games and television and these entertainment, these fictions, do you have these like super mad geniuses. Geniuses are normally stable people, like Donald J. Trump, the president. It's a very stable genius. So they get to the kind of points where if that happens, somebody somehow gets access to some kind of dirty bomb, some kind of or goes into some kind of nuclear power station, breaks down all the fail safes and things like that, and lets the nuclear power station go off, even though those nuclear power stations are not normally in the city. But I can see some kind of situation where maybe like 10,000, a couple of tens of thousands of people actually die in some kind of attack that may spark off someone who's like, I'm on this side, I have this militia, and then enough people may actually uh, commiserate or come to that person's defense and say, yeah, we're going to jump on this person's side. And then what? How does this break out into any kind of war in the United States of America? Maybe there's going to be a city and a certain area where these people come against these other people, but that's going to be hushed really quick. So the person comes back with a response saying like there's some obscure book that they can remember, some sort that imagines civil war in the U.S. in 2030, and that's what I'm talking about. You have to imagine the Civil War in 2030. It's a book. He's proving my point by saying, yeah, this is some fictional book, and it's imagined it. It's not real. It's not realistic. It's a book. This book's about a lot. This book's about wizards. It doesn't mean a wizard's going to all of a sudden pop out and do something. And then he's talking about the U.S. Army is about 44% minority. And there's this even song by Underground Technique about that. And of course, he's not for it happening. But I'm like, okay, comes to the military thing. I've played team sports. I wrestled, which is more of an individual sport to the team where you individually go out and combat somebody, but your teams gets the points together. You train as a team and you support each other in that way. I've played American football. And I had a video talking about how I think American football is a very quintessential American thing. And why I said that in that is because with American football, the people are not like when you play football like in the World Cup. It's where it's like, technically, I think someone like Messi, yes, he's really good as a striker, but he can move around the field. He can play different positions. Ronaldo can definitely play all over the field. Like, you can be the best player in the game, and then you can move around. You could probably even play goalie. But I'd say goalie is the only position on the field in football, in the soccer, that's, okay, this is very different from other positions. The other positions, I know when you actually get to the technical level, you get to the higher levels, you can switch around and things like that. But if you're really good at defense, your body itself, your physical abilities itself are not necessarily completely different from being a good striker. Pretty much you put the striker who has the best kick, who is the best at positioning where the ball is going to go, catching passes and kicking it in, getting past the goalie and things like that. You want that from a striker. But pretty much all the other talents he has can be used in other positions. The people in defense can also score. They can also head in, like when the ball comes in. They'll do those some things. But when it comes to American football, a really good wide receiver cannot play center. A really good quarterback, in most cases, like Tom Brady is a good example, amazing quarterback, he's not going to play cornerback. He's not going to be a safety. He can't switch his other positions. And I think that's what the United States of America does in an excellent way. The division of labor, getting to that team kind of environment. So playing American football and seeing the camaraderie that was built up between me and my teammates. I still have this one teammate that these different people that I talk to occasionally online. One of them, we just had these really good conversations back and forth. We disagree on some things politically, but we can have this cordial relationship. And I think a big part of that is due to the fact that we both played football, we both have that background, we both went to schools. And I know there's some indoctrination that comes with this in the United States of America that I talk about, where people come in and now you go through the schooling system and you get built into this Americana kind of environment. But it's a very real thing. That kind of system actually builds up bonds. And if I can build up that bond just attending a regular school, regular high school with people who's happened to live in a certain area and deciding to play this game, that we have these shared kind of ideas and things like that, it's a win or loss, and our lives aren't counting on it. And you're trying to compare that kind of camaraderie is not that hard to get over. So when you join the military, people have bonds that are built up in there. They're not just going to all of a sudden be like, yeah, first of all, the same thing I was talking about with the different gangs and things like that. These people aren't just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to leave all my brothers, I'm going to leave my entire team that I trained with, went through boot camp, might have actually gone on tour with, might have actually had people shoot at me with. I'm not going to abandon them and be like, oh, because you're white now, I'm going to go and fight against you. Now, even if it's certain percent minority and things like that, I think the military is 65 to 75% Republican voting. It could be more conservative. I don't know, but if it's on the lines of ethnicity and race, I don't think it's going to get the situation where the military is going to divide up in that kind of sense. I don't see that happening. I see them sticking better, more close to the whole idea of the United States of America and that kind of nationalism. That's why I just don't see it. How is the military going to play a part in a civil war? And okay, as I said, it's going to make a great video game, if anything. then something is going on in the United States of America. And this is what I was talking about at the start with the whole Maxine Waters thing. Something is going on. For Maxine Waters to be able to come out and just be like, yeah, like we need to harass people in the Trump administration and have people, I'm just wondering, when you guys hear Maxine Waters say this, people who are Democrats, people who are on the left politically, do you think it's kind of like, oh, that's just the crazy aunt. We don't take her seriously. It's not an issue. Because what I was talking about with that first person who sent that tweet, where I was saying I don't take them seriously when they talk about how Donald J. Trump is a Nazi, is a KKK. Because he does similar things. I mean, not similar things, but the things he says, if anything Trump has said is actually a situation where he is inciting violence, then what is the things that Maxine Waters say? Even Nancy Pelosi, who I think like Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi, kind of an odd situation. They're like a photocopy of each other. It's like a negative. It's like you invert. You go in like you go in like Photoshop and you invert colors because like Nancy Pelosi pretty much looks like the white version of Maxine Waters, and they have said some kind of inane things in the same way. But I think Maxine Waters also does her things in that crazy black lady kind of way, that sassy black lady kind of way, and then Nancy Pelosi kind of has her own like, oh, I'm in this proper white lady, but snarky and will bite at you kind of way. So there's this kind of back and forth thing that they have together. I seen them give speeches together, and it was kind of funny. In a way, it would be less funny if I think it was less damaging because something is going on. But what exactly is it that's going on in the situation? What's actually going to have an issue here? And this guy also responded back with a couple of things I was writing, like, okay, that 44% minority in the military is not going to break out in racial groups and all of a sudden or unite as a 44% against the 60. I mean, sorry, against the 54% white. It's just not. That's not how the military works. And so I was asking him, have you been in a team? Have you worked in actual sports? Have you worked in actual team environments like that? Have you experienced the actual camaraderie that comes to that? He didn't answer. But I checked, and I just think, like, take an example. If you've lived in the United States of America, if you've been in a place like New York City, you go to any neighborhood in New York City, and I know New York City is not completely indicative of the entire United States of America. I know that from personal experience living in the countryside, where it's more predominantly people of recent European origin and things like that. So the ethnicities might not be that mixed up, but they still watch television. They still have some kind of exposure to other people. And the country itself is getting a lot more exposed to other ideas and things like that. And it's had that. You take a neighborhood like Brooklyn and the major cities in the United States of America, and as I mentioned, there's Republicans, there's people who come in and out, there's people relations like that, or even the Republicans themselves in the outskirts doing different things. They understand that we work for certain things, we produce certain things here, and then those things are delivered to there's some kind of connection. There's a lot of more connection in the places. It's intertwined. The United States of America is united. There are differences in the country right now, but trust me, I've seen it. It is united. So to have people kind of think like, yes, the guy mentioned, what are the countries he mentioned here? He mentioned that that last point that I pointed out could be challenged by Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Yugoslav armies, saying those armies broke down on ethnic lines. Those armies broke down on tribal lines. But I was like, are you really trying to compare the United States Army to the Iraqi army that was, first of all, initiated under the despotic rule of Saddam Hussein, or the situation in Yugoslavia, I think the Serbia kind of situation, that was also based on religious lines. There was like the Christians and there was the Muslims, and then there are also actual tribal lines. This is also when people talk about the union of the white race and things like that. I'm like, not so fast, like Lee Corso. Not so fast. No, there's actual divisions. There's actual different things in there. I think I might wind this down. So let me come down to the end of this. And it's looking like I'm going to have to add the other parts on separate videos because this thing has extended a lot longer than I actually thought it was going to get into. So yes, I did open up saying I was going to show you different things, and those different parts will come in the next 2 days. I think I'll have the next part tomorrow and the other part after that. And they'll all be tied in together as this one long magnum opus of this whole civil war and issues coming around it. So this is part one. But let's finish this up now. So coming back to the last thing, one second. Okay, so we're on the conclusion part here. Let's see if we can wind this down in under 10 minutes. I'll try to aim for that. So here we go. This thing that was also now Occupy Democrats again. We've been hitting them up a lot in this post. So for those of you who don't know, if you're listening to this, just yesterday when I'm reading this, it was, when was this? Saturday, June 30th, and this, of course, will be continued in the next couple of videos as I talked about, where I'll go more into this. It might actually be one more video, depending on how it goes. But there was a shooting that occurred at a, what's it called? At a newspaper in Annapolis, Maryland, and 5 people have been shot dead by the count right now. There was 7 people critically wounded, so the death toll could go higher. The person was caught and he was not cooperative with the police, but his initial description was a white man in a ponytail. And people proceeded to freak right out and, of course, blame Donald J. Trump for this, saying, this is one of the tweets that has actually been posted out there. This is an Occupy Democrats. This was posted by them. It says, just 3 nights ago at a rally in South Carolina, Trump pointed at the journalists in the back of the room and shouted, "They are the enemy of the people." Today, a mass shooter killed at least 4 journalists in Maryland. Trump has blood on his hands. So as I mentioned, when Maxine Waters came out with her hate hustling, talking about we have to harass all people in administration. If you see them outside, don't let them eat. Don't let them walk by themselves. We have to harass them. And people go out and do that. Does Maxine Waters have blood on their hands? I don't see the media coming out and saying that, although maybe some people have. There's some people, as I talked about, Nancy Pelosi came out and rebuked her. There was a Republican who was actually put in the papers for her to resign over this, but Maxine Waters herself doubled down, and I'm actually kind of proud to say this. I actually know somebody who actually went out and accused her. This is Laura Loomer. I met her a couple of times, and she's a rather interesting character. I have some disagreements with some of her stances like feminism, things like that. But I think she's doing a lot of good work. As I talked about, I do enjoy Donald J. Trump. I am on the Trump train and things like that. And she's done, I think, a lot more with what she's done to advance the cause than to limit it. She has had some questionable things that I may have disagreed with and other people have pointed out, but she's doing good work out there. And she went out with Maxine Waters, and after Maxine Waters said, we have to go out and do this, she said, okay, I'm a Republican. Where can I have dinner without being bothered? Where can I do this? Do I have to sit from the back of the bus, which is kind of a play on the whole thing with the segregation. And I've seen people come out Sabo was posting this thing where he's like, Republican sans Verboten. It's written in German in that black letter text before saying Republicans can't eat, talking about Democrats resist, don't do business with Republicans, buy Democrat. So it's kind of a play on how they're calling people fascists, they're calling people Nazis. They're saying this initial tweet was it's a crystal knock. This is really happening. If you truly believed it's really happening, you wouldn't just be tweeting, going about your business, posting selfies and things like that. There weren't people, I know they did have cameras and things like that, but the Jews weren't sitting around, or the people who Adolf Hitler was going against the beer house push and all these kind of things. The communists that were brought in and then they turned on them, and the brown shirts went in and massacred them all. They weren't just going about their daily life, which was a very, very dangerous time. It was a horribly dangerous time, and the things people were living on a nice edge. The economy itself of the country was just in the pits from the result that had happened after the First World Wars. There was so much going on that if you truly understood history, there's no possible way these people could utter what they're talking about now. And the people who I think do understand history, like the Maxine Waters kind of people, those are the people I truly find to be hateful, because even if they don't truly understand it, they have enough access to time, to information to get it. I find it inexcusable that they haven't gone to the point to understand what exactly there is that they're talking about. So there's no excuse for people like that, in my opinion. So Laura Loomer went out and did this, and there was this whole repetition thing. She got to where she was like, come to my office and we gonna talk. Come to my office. And that's not a good Maxine Waters. Her voice, I don't want to be able to speak like Maxine Waters. But he gets into this elevator, and then this man, he's in there with a couple of people, security people or whatnot, and he's just repeating, this is a members elevator. Members have to vote. This is a members elevator. Members have to vote. And this repetition thing. And that's going to be another video also talking about the repetition and how effective is this repetition. And that's what I'm talking about here. They're saying Trump has been saying these things repeatedly and that's why he has blood in his hands. Maxine Waters and people on the political left have been repeating how much Donald J. Trump is a Nazi, like how much people on the right are Nazis, how this is actually happening, collusion with Russia. And why is collusion with Russia such a bad thing? Because of that whole communist aspect of Russia. Yet they have to separate that socialism is part and parcel of communism. They have to separate all the deaths that resulted from the United Soviet States of Russia. They have to separate all the deaths that occurred in the Communist Revolution in China. They have to separate that the National German Workers, Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, was fascist, was socialist. They have to take those things away, because if they truly understood that, they couldn't be socialists on themselves, because I think most people are good people. They're just very misguided. So this whole repetition thing, they're saying Trump is repeating this over and over again, and that's why these people are doing these things. Turns out this guy, Ramos, the shooter or whatnot, actually had some issues with some defamation lawsuit against this particular newspaper from back in like 2012? Some time back. This has been an ongoing thing with him, and then he just apparently snapped and went into the shotgun and did all these things. So more information is going to come out, but they're saying that was him. Now, if that was because of Trump, when Scalise and the other politicians were playing baseball and that guy went out to the field and had his gun and was shooting at them and shot Representative Scalise, was that because of the rhetoric of the Nazis have to be stopped, they're taking America away, or democracy is going away, it's over for us? Is it a war? Is it a civil war going to happen? And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying these actual things aren't politically inspired and due to political rifts and shifts in the country. Those do exist, but I don't see these breaking out into any kind of civil war that we understand as civil war as. And just as my understanding with what this person said to begin with, talking about crystal night, revolution, and death, I don't really think that means what I think it means when they say that. So when somebody says there's a civil war about to break out, what do they mean by that? And it's the thing, I don't understand. A friend of mine was talking about how people can't really think for themselves and they go along with what people say. And I'm thinking, am I overestimating how independently people think? You know, like that shooting in Maryland had a lot of extenuating circumstances. And I don't think it's that connected to what politicians are saying. I think there's something, politicians aren't really that ingenious in general. What they do is they stick their finger in the air and see where the wind is blowing and then jump with that. So there actually are certain divides that are in the actual countries, actually issues happening, and they're jumping on those things. So what are the currents? What are the things leading the people themselves to be in these situations that politicians can then jump on and take advantage of? You know, and I was saying this here, I was like, there definitely are people who, if you're out with them and you say that that person is an enemy, you get to borrow something like, oh, that person insulted me. There's people who will think like, okay, I'm going to go fight that person immediately. But as I mentioned at the start, it's not that frequent of a thing. The level that requires for people to actually engage in physical violence against somebody who they don't actually recognize as completely weaker than them is very low. For somebody to be like, that person is capable to actually defend themselves, I'm going to attack them and risk my bodily damage, it's very low. Somebody has to be maybe inebriated or just unaware of the situation, or completely vastly underestimate the danger of that other person, or the ability of that other person to met out violence for them to just initiate that violence, or overestimate their own ability. And now I don't see people on the political left talking about revolution and things like that being in a situation where they underestimate the danger coming from the political right. If anything, they overestimate the danger. They're saying, at least they're giving it lip service, saying these people are going to destroy the world. So if these people are so fearful, get them so triggered just by words, how are they going to overcome that fear of them and get to the point where they're going to arm themselves and physically attack these people? It's not going to happen. You just look at your average person on the political left, Antifa type sort of people, and that's also another Antifa thing. You can see why they actually go away from violence, because they're talking about how, oh, the political right are violent. They're the violent people. We don't want violence. We want this kind of situation. We want proxy violence at most, somebody else committing this violence for us. Have the state control these people, have them go out and take the resources from these people and redistribute it to us and the power, that kind of situation. But they don't want to be the people going out there and actually getting their hands dirty. They don't. That's why I think with Antifa, it's slowly been kind of hushed off and pushed to the side because there was irrefutable proof that Antifa themselves were actually violent. And they don't want to be associated with that. They're not necessarily that physically violent themselves. So how are they actually going to be the ones going out and committing this violence? I don't really see it. So one positive thing I think I see about this is people like Maxine Waters coming out and saying this, and enough evidence is going to pile up where you can't deny it anymore, where people need a different level of evidence. I was a lot more obese than I am. I'm trying to work on my health and my weight. And for everyone, weight is an example where I think everybody has a level where they'll get to the point and they'll be like, okay, enough. I get it. I'm getting too big. I have to diet. I have to do something, change my life around, figure out what is the main issues that are leading me to eat in this way and to be unhealthy in this way, where I have to go down. For somebody, they may get up to 220 pounds and like, I have to do something about this. I have to get back down to 180. Like I just saw this thing by Mike Rowe. It's an amazing person, Mike Rowe. He was like my uncle. So the uncle everybody should have. Amazing posts and things like that. But anyway, he was talking about how he's losing weight, trying to get back to 180 in a couple of months. And he just put his mind to it and was like, I have to do this. I got older and I did this. His level was 240. I was 200 and I was like 240 pounds when I was 16. So for me, that's not my point. And I have a different body type and things like that. I think I got up to about 340, probably higher, when I was finding like, dude, I have to do something about this. So I think that level of evidence gets to the point where some people just see one point of hypocrisy. Like I said, I was in this journey, jumping into this information, trying to understand both my life and how to set up the carbon universe. And it made me realize these different things where I was like, I can't support Democrats. I can't be on the political left. I can't support the state. I can't even be on the right. I have to be an anarcho-capitalist. Or now I'm like, okay, I'm looking at anarcho-capitalism. Is it realistic to just be an ANCAP? How would actually that be achieved? How will anarchism actually be achieved where you have rules and laws, but you don't have a ruling class, a leading class that's above the laws? Okay, maybe be conservative, then how does that actually come in? Okay, yes, maybe support the Republican Party on certain things, maybe be a libertarian politically, and then you start building things like that, that journey, that search for actual information. Because people want to be right, people want to be correct. They may be able to switch things around, but they want to be right and want to be correct. So I think once people have enough evidence to say, like, look, what Maxine Waters says is pretty much more damning than anything that Donald J. Trump has said. Yet these people are just always jumping on Donald J. Trump and saying nothing about Maxine Waters. Or they're not seeing the connection. Or they're just like, if enough people, Maxine Waters is bad enough for me to not be able to be on this team anymore. That's kind of situation that's coming up, and I think enough people are going to see that. You know, like enough people are not going to be able to be inconsistent enough to not hold that consistent kind of situation where if inciting politically is a negative thing from Donald J. Trump, from the things he says, then anyone on the political left that says that should also be persona non grata. And then they'll actually start searching out and saying, okay, how much has this person told me is true? How much is this repetition and how much is actually something that I've experienced? And let me finish up with this thing that I wrote, because we had this back and forth with another person who was just like, okay, so this person was like, I won't hold Trump accountable for what he said at the place, pointing and saying, that's the enemy. And I said, yes, I don't even think these people really hold him accountable in the basic sense. They don't value that sort of accountability. I don't think you can be as inconsistent with who they blame and still hold that position. It's a whole compartmentalization. They hear what Trump says and say the other. Just like the conversation I talked about with that scientific communist, he gave me this link to something about scientific socialists, sorry. He gave me this link by this speech by Hans Hermann Hoppe talking about how Marx was right. But he talks about how Marx was right kind of at the start, just giving the introduction and the outline of what he's going to talk about. Then he goes on to talk about how different it is from Austrian economics and libertarians and things like that, and anarchism, how anti-anarchism communism is, then he talks about some more similarities and then goes again to show how the base the base material being discussed, a base understanding of humans, how humans work, and the base understanding of the interactions between humans is how they automatically think all interactions between workers and the capitalist and the entrepreneur is a situation where somebody is being, someone is enslaved. They're talking about how the worker is always being taken advantage of, yet if you do see capitalism for what it is, you see there are win-win situations. Certain people don't see win-win situations. So he was completely, this scientific socialist, if he actually watched that video, if he listened to the entire thing, he did hear it, but hearing is not listening. You can hear things, but not listen. Like, let's say somebody was speaking another language, someone comes in and speaking Mandarin Chinese. I can hear all the sounds that the person is making, but I can't listen because I won't be able to understand and absorb what that person is saying. So you see that kind of difference? So people can hear what Maxine Waters is saying, but they're not listening to what Maxine is saying. They might not even hear what Trump says, but they'll just listen. They'll say, okay, yes, for that I'm actually, yes, listen and believe kind of things. So let's talk about that. And the person said, I don't want the left to hold them accountable, though. The fact that they're saying this means that they'll have to apply the same principle themselves. For one, that would mean that Trump ever gets harmed or assassinated, they should be held accountable too. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. There might be attempts. I think there's always people talking about how there's lots of attempts that we don't even hear about. The best kind of security is the ones you don't hear about. But I don't think it's going to get that far. But there's already been situations where people have been, on the political left, have been motivated and attacked politicians. There's been the recent situations of Sarah Sanders is being booted out of the Red Hen restaurant. There's a situation of the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security or the Secretary of Homeland Security being kicked out of a Mexican restaurant by people. There's been the actual shooting, like of Steve Scalise that I talked about and things like that. Politically motivated violence has occurred. There's Antifa who was kind of hushed out and moved away. So that's occurred. So that's going to continue to build up where people on the left, who I know people on the political left who are good people, and they want people to stand for this. And they're already there, and this kind of evidence is already there. So the last thing I said was, does it? Like, for me, things like this got me closer to rationality. The drive for consistency, but as it was said before, that people don't have to be rationally consistent. Or is it like a language? You repeat a language enough and you start speaking it, you start thinking in that language. It doesn't have to be true, just useful. Like, there's now kind of thing where like Italian itself is more true than Swahili. Like a bottle in Italian is bottiglia, a bottle in Swahili is chupa. If you live in a certain area and you learn those two different words, and I call that bottle the chupa, and then somebody else calls it the bottiglia, one of the other people are not right. The Italian is not more right about what the thing is than this person speaking Swahili. They're both talking about the same thing. That's the whole kind of situation I said. Most of the problems occur from people defining X in a certain way instead of what X actually is. They're talking about the same thing, but they have a different sound, a different word, expression for what that thing is. So somebody may be talking about fascism, and what Trump is what they have in their mind identified as fascism, but what I have in my mind identified as fascism is the Nazi party. So I'm like, there's a disconnect there. There's no possible way Trump is close to the Nazi party, but because they have described fascism as that, and they think the Nazi party is doing things that Trump was doing, so they actually think they're right, but they're not actually correct. In that situation, I'm right. Like, okay, so get back to this. So I was saying, like, I do hope so. I'm being a bit pessimistic and devil's advocate in some of these things. Since people like Maxine Waters' utterings are the propensity of aggression from progressives will continue to build evidence and reach high enough for enough people to satisfy the requirement to question allegiances. So yeah, I think I've seen more on the left already begin to distance themselves from Maxine Waters' type and actually think that's how Antifa was quietly shuffled away out of the public light, because right after the war, right after the election, I think they were being lauded as these champions of the left and things like that. Antifa's fighting the good fight. Support Antifa. Why is the media talking about Antifa badly? And then like, oh wait, no, Antifa actually is pretty bad. And when is the last time you heard a positive story about Antifa? I think it is in general broken up, and these people may have gone and joined other groups and splintered around, but it's not being held up as this group of okay people actually got, I think the SPLC, not SPLC, but I think once the National Department of Homeland Security or something said they were actually terrorists, that kind of broke up kind of quick. They were like, okay, we actually know people's names. We've actually got evidence of you attacking people with bike locks. We know your addresses and things like that. That got hushed up pretty quick. I think they realized like, hey, we can't actually have this kind of thing going on. So that's it for now. The next couple of videos, maybe 2 videos, maybe 1 video, is going to be talking about the messaging that's occurring and it's creating this kind of thing, and also just talking about the results of this, how are we going to go about this, identify the problem, and what possible solutions may occur. And I think I'll have that separate video also just talking about celebrities and who are we listening to and how are we listening to their material. What are we hearing and what are we listening to? So that's it for this video. Thanks a lot for actually bearing with me through this thing. This is kind of a mix of different things. I was wondering, should I break these things apart? Like, just, I think it's ridiculous that I actually thought I was actually going to get these 3 topics into one video. But this video itself has separate topics that I was thinking of releasing smaller videos. And there may be a few things that I pull out from these and have a separate video where I just kind of make it more concise and put it out there in a kind of a small like nugget version that's more edible and more put together. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the longer form videos. I had some listeners before who say they preferred these longer form ones, and I think I'll try to get to these more and let some things kind of pile up and just go out the stream of thought with it. But yeah, like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy these, if you can help me out on Patreon. You can donate $1 or more. Whatever is given will be a big help. I'm going to try to upgrade some of my things slowly by slowly with money I get from making these videos, get a better mic and get a video situation. Just try to get a better product and try to bring more of actual conversations. Conversations is something I actually will try to do. There's a couple of people I'd like to have conversations with because I really enjoy those. But yeah, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks a lot. This is Silas saying goodbye. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think a civil war is coming? If so, what kind of civil war do you think it's going to be? What sides do you think are going to be? Who's going to win? Do you think this is practical? Do you think it's only some kind of fantasy type of situation? Goodbye.